Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're talking about converting from compatible query mode to dynamic query mode in Cognos. This is Holly Rice, and I am from the marketing team over at Motio, and we are excited to have Sumit Kumar from Performance Food Group. He will be talking about the challenges that they had in their conversion, their approach to it, and also about how they improved their report execution time. After we hear from Sumit, we'll hear from Ryan Bala from Motio. He's one of our senior software engineers over here. He'll be talking about a new feature in our MotioCI product and about how we can expedite those conversions. And we'll really hone in on how this technology can pinpoint output differences that happen after converting to DQM. So let's jump into our first poll question. So what's your main driver for adopting DQM? Or if you're in the process, what was the main reason? Are you moving to Cognos Analytics on the cloud? Do you want to use JDBC drivers instead of a native database client? Or do you want to get greater visibility into performance-related characteristics of queries? So if you'll take a few seconds and just choose the main reason that applies to you. All right, and let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Okay, performance-related. Very interesting. And some of you, it looks like, are moving to Cognos on the cloud as well here. All right, last poll question before we get to Sumit's presentation. Why are you here today? What brings you here? Do you want to increase your knowledge and get prepared for your own conversion? Or if you're one of the people that's moving to the cloud, you have to convert to DQM. So is this a webinar that you're looking to gain information from for that purpose? You see the advantage of DQM, but you really have no time to deal with the testing, the issues, and remediations that are needed. Or I'm always interested in learning from the experiences of other Cognos customers, such as Performance Food Group today, and what they're doing in their Cognos implementations. So just take a couple of seconds and pick the best answer that applies to you. All right, let's see the results. Okay, overwhelmingly, most of you are here to get that good knowledge and get prepared for your conversion. Okay, so enough from me. Let's get to Sumit.
Hi, I am Sumit Kumar. I am IT Manager for Performance Food Group, a leading broadline distribution company. I oversee entire reporting, analysis, consulting unit for the centralized enterprise reporting service function. We have recently upgraded our Cognos version from 10.2.1 to 11.0.12 and all our packages from compatible query mode to dynamic query mode as part of continuous improvement in our offering. We faced some challenges while upgrading Cognos version as well as during the conversion of the packages. I am going to share our learning with you, which will help you in your initiative. I will cover the motivation behind taking up the project to convert the packages, challenges we faced, and how we resolved it. First, we decided that why we want to convert the project. One of the reasons was our business community requested a way to build a report that has data from more than one subject area. By subject area, we mean a package in Cognos. So, our business wanted to build a report which has sales data, procurement data, and inventory data in the same report, even though those three were three different packages. And we cannot build a report if the packages are not in dynamic query mode. We also wanted to reduce the execution time of the report by leveraging the query execution on 64-bit architecture. We wanted to prepare our infrastructure for future upgrades and initiate predictive analytics in our organization. These reasons were enough to justify our projects. We had 13 Cognos packages to be converted. We faced challenge with the project planning itself. Should we go with waterfall or agile? How should we deploy the package? If all the reports built over the package works and a few do not work, should we deploy the package or should we wait till we fix all the reports? How much buffer should we keep? After working with stakeholders, we decided to go with agile methodology for compatible query mode to dynamic query mode conversion. As each package can be deployed independently, we deployed the package when all the important reports ran successfully. If there are some low priority reports with errors, we deploy the package and fix the reports later. This allowed us to deliver business value upfront without losing any time. We kept a month time buffer in case we need some support from IBM product support team. Other challenges were technical and infrastructure challenges due to the behavior of the package in dynamic query mode. Dynamic query mode enforces certain best practices that are optional in compatible query mode. Compatible query mode accepts hyphen or asterisk with forward slash as commented line. Dynamic query mode sometimes accepts hyphen as commented and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on where those hyphens were placed. If it is in the middle of the query statement, calculated columns, or SQL queries, it sometimes accepts and sometimes it doesn't. Similarly, if you have a sum function in your data model itself or the package definition itself, you have to replace it with total function. Sum function gives error when it is present in your package definition. Compatible query mode makes certain assumption that dynamic query mode does not. You may notice some difference with the report outputs. When you run a report in compatible query mode, it will give you one result, and when you run the same report on a package which is in dynamic query mode, it may give you different results. The reason is how it interprets a function. For example, the total of total sales in compatible query mode, it will give you a result which is equivalent to total sales. It ignores the duplicate total. However, dynamic query mode doesn't do it. It actually gives you a result total of sales. Even though the behavior in dynamic query mode is correct, but it will change the report output, which will trigger that you should do the investigation why the report numbers are different. Similarly, it is also different that how the aggregation options are implemented in dynamic query mode and in compatible query mode. Aggregation options are implemented religiously in dynamic query mode. The filter behavior on calculated query in compatible query mode and dynamic query mode is different. The filter defined on calculated columns are applied after aggregation, irrespective of you chose before aggregation or after aggregation. When converted to dynamic query mode, the aggregation properties selection is applied correctly. The result of query provides different results in compatible query mode and dynamic query mode if the aggregation property is set to before auto aggregation. So look for it. The only way we found out was when we compared the two reports before and after. We saw the difference, and then we manually went into the reports and looked for it. We faced the report output differences for other reasons as well. So it all depends that dynamic query mode, when you have a package defined in dynamic query mode, it applies different order of operations that causes changes in report output. It seems the cardinality between joins of queries becomes a lot important in dynamic query mode than the compatible query mode. In compatible query mode version, it ignores whatever cardinality that you have defined. But in dynamic query mode, it takes it very religiously. So look for it. You have to make sure that the cardinality in the report is defined correctly. Cognos in dynamic query mode error message renders after all the validation message has passed. So when you do a report validation, if compiler founds warning message before the critical error, it shows only the warning message first. But when you run the report will throw error. So what we have to do, that we have to fix all the warning message before the report compiler or validation could show us the actual error. So that took some time. Whenever we have a situation where report is not running and there is only a warning message, we first fixed the warning message, then we saw the critical error, and then we fixed it. We just have to spend a lot more time to fix a warning message, even though it was not necessary. Apart from that, we have some problem with those reports where it brings huge amount of data to render the report. So the report were failing with Java out of memory issue. To resolve this issue, we disable the local caching property in the report properties for those reports. Once we do that, the report runs without any issue. Apart from all this, we have fine-tuned our JVM configuration. We worked with best practices, look into the documents, and then we fine-tune it so that our environment runs fine. Now, the conversion of package to dynamic query mode is effort well spent. After the conversion, the report execution time was reduced by 60% on average. So I will definitely recommend to convert the package from CQM to DQM and environment from 32-bit to 64-bit.
Thank you, Sumit. I'm going to log into my MotioCI environment now. I already have a couple projects set up to demonstrate how we would go about testing CQM to DQM migration. The first one is our CQM results project. So we would consider this sort of our original development project. So when we were developing reports against CQM, we would have had this project there testing as we went along. If I go to project settings here, I can see that I've got it set to default package query mode, which in this case would be compatible query mode. We also have the option of selecting force compatible or force dynamic, but I'm going to leave this one default. So we'll go over here to the test cases, and you can see we're in pretty good shape here. Most of our tests have succeeded. We do have a few warnings, but they are producing outputs. So this first warning is just that we don't have a sort defined on one of our crosstabs. We're not going to do anything about it at this moment, but it is something that we can keep in mind. So the next project that I have set up is our CQM to DQM migration project. I've already cloned all of the test cases that we had from our original project over to this project, and now I've just got to set it to run in DQM mode. So this one I'm going to force to run in dynamic query mode. One thing to note is MotioCI is able to run the reports against CQM or DQM in the same environment without impacting the live package, the live reports. So that keeps us from having to set up a separate sandbox environment for DQM testing. We don't have to set up a separate data source. We can be working both with CQM and DQM simultaneously in the same environment. So now that we've got it running as force dynamic, we're going to add a new assertion here to compare our results from the DQM project to our CQM project. So I'm going to select an assertion I'd created, this output comparison versus CQM results. Okay, now we've got those. Let me go in here and show you what one of those looks like. So here under employee satisfaction, we have output comparison versus CQM results. And you can see what it does is it compares the outputs from this instance against the project CQM results. So now that we've got that all set up, we can go ahead and run our test cases. So here we go. So let's see. While these test cases are running, maybe we can talk a bit about some of the challenges that MotioCI aims to address. So CQM is often pretty lax, allowing less than optimal reporting and modeling practices. DQM, on the other hand, is very strict and really forces developers to be on their best behavior. This is great for new development, since you know everything will follow best practices moving forward. But this does present a huge challenge for projects that are migrating from CQM to DQM, particularly long-lived projects that have been in CQM land for a long while. Furthermore, there are a number of bugs in CQM that have now been fixed in DQM. So certain CQM behaviors that you may have worked around in the past could produce unexpected results when you migrate to DQM. So I think a lot of the anxiety around migrating from CQM to DQM comes from the fear that you'll have to comb through every single report, through every single model, looking for these very nitpicky and sometimes esoteric differences. So what MotioCI really aims to do is to drastically reduce the scope of that search. MotioCI really allows report developers and framework modelers such as yourselves to focus on analyzing the problems where they exist, rather than wasting all your effort just finding those issues. So to do this, we sort of take a black box approach to testing your reporting stack. Sometimes issues are easy to spot. Some reports simply won't execute in DQM. For instance, when you have comments in data items, they may have worked in CQM, but when you move to DQM, you won't be able to run the report at all. Now, the trickier issues are those that successfully run but produce subtly different results. To find those issues, you really need to directly compare your DQM outputs with your CQM outputs. Here, we're running the same reports against the same framework model and the same data source on the same Cognos instance. So the only difference is that one set of outputs is CQM and the other is DQM. So effectively, we've controlled our variables so that we can be certain that any differences that arise are directly the result of CQM versus DQM. So we can then safely ignore those outputs that produce those reports that produce identical outputs and focus our efforts on the reports that didn't. So let's see. So now that these reports have executed, we see that we have successes for about half of them, but then we do have a few failures. So let's take a look at a couple of these and see what has gone on in the conversion to DQM. So for this first one, it says we do have a textual difference on page 1. So let's just take a look at that. Here we go. So it looks like in this case, what we probably have is a difference in our, here, let me go. Yeah, it looks like we've just got a difference in our sorting behavior. So if you don't have sorts applied to a list or a crosstab, then the default sorting behavior will just differ between the different query engines. Let's take a look at another one of these. Here we have margin by quarter. Okay, so here we have another textual difference. Here we go. So this one is a little bit more interesting. See, because we've got our data is mostly the same, except for our aggregates have changed between CQM and DQM. So now that we see that the behavior has differed between CQM and DQM, we know to focus on this report or this area of our model. So you can see how we've already been able to narrow the scope of the conversion. And now that we've identified the reporting areas that need attention, MotioCI can continue to help us along with that conversion effort. So as you address issues in the model, you'll begin to see that all the affected reports start to sync up with their CQM counterparts. And once you've addressed the model, you can move on to any remaining issues in individual reports. So once these are all showing green, you can be very certain that your CQM to DQM conversion is done, and more importantly, has been done correctly. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Sumit and Ryan. Okay, let's get to some of your questions. Let's see here. Okay, we have one. Did you face a scenario where a report was running better in CQM but runs longer in DQM mode? I believe this one is for you, Sumit.
I believe it's Nagendra's question. Yes, Nagendra, we faced one issue where the CQM report in CQM mode was working faster than DQM. However, if you will dig deeper, there are, when we dig deeper into our reports, there are three things we identified. One, those reports has a lot of warning messages. So when you go from CQM to DQM, every warning message will slow down a performance a little bit. Second thing, what we noticed was our JVM configuration doesn't allow enough memory onto the server. DQM works on caching data for a certain amount of time. So you have to make sure that the report, the server has enough memory space. And third, your JVM configuration is optimum for your server definition. Once you will do that, you will find that the DQM report always runs faster than that. Having said that, one thing which I will definitely say, that do not look for the benefit on individual reports. Look for the overall how much you are gaining in totality, not for the individual reports.
Okay, thank you, Sumit. Okay, our next question. Did you clone the package and publish it to DQM? Ryan, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So the CQM versus DQM is a property that gets set on the package itself. So effectively, yeah, in the background, what we're doing is we're cloning the package, setting to a different location, and then we're running your reports against that cloned package. That way, we aren't directly impacting your live environment and with the testing. So that way, you can always continue to develop and test at the same time, and that's very important to us. So that testing doesn't get in the way of development.
Okay, when you find an aggregate diff, how do you resolve this? Do you try to do it different in the CQM report so that CQM and DQM is the same? Or do you fix the DQM report so that you get two versions of one report and a CQM and DQM report? In other words, can you fix all the CQM reports so that if you go to DQM, all the reports give the same output? I think this one is for...
I have some input on it,
okay,
but I don't know
so maybe both Sumit and Ryan can answer.
So I guess I can go first. I mean, I think the first goal, if we're sure we're happy with the results from our CQM packages, the first goal would be to try to get identical outputs between CQM and DQM. Now, since this is a migration, kind of on a case-by-case basis, I think you may end up in situations where you would have to kind of take a look at the DQM outputs and get that to a point where you're happy with them. But I think that would, my guess is that would be the exception rather than the norm. Sumit, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think you have covered it. Just if I will just add one thing on that. I think the question is more towards when we are doing the development, because end goal for everything is that you will have one version of report running in production. So I think in development you can choose. You always want, after converting your package to DQM, the report should give the right answer. And if the CQM was right, you fix the DQM report and then keep it so that you can deploy it into production. You should always keep as a best practice a copy of it so that you can compare the results.
Okay, here's one. If you have a 32-bit server, can you run two different CQM and DQM on the same server?
I believe that DQM would be 64-bit only, and that's part of when Cognos is moved from CQM to DQM. That's part of what they wanted to take on, is adding 64-bit support specifically for better OLAP performance. So. But I suppose that's just my understanding. So we may need to verify that.
I can confirm. Yes, book-wise, or it's right that DQM will run only on 64-bit. But if when we were doing this development, it was when we connected with IBM support, it was told that you can run CQM package and DQM package on 32-bit machine, and that worked for us. However, when we moved, when you convert your server to 64-bit architecture, then only DQM will be supported. CQM will not work there.
Here's a question for Sumit. How long does this take? How long did Sumit take for previous projects to finish? I have thousands of reports. How do I start?
Okay. Yeah, so generally it depends on how much report inventory you have. If you have hundreds of packages and thousands of reports, it is going to take longer, maybe an year or so. But we have when we converted from CQM to DQM, we had around 1,200 reports and 13 packages. It included a report developed by IT, and there are some user developed report as well. It took us 2.5 months to finish it. It may be that we didn't face a lot of problems with DQM. We faced problem with, say, around 13 or 14 reports. That took time. That took time to find the root cause and get the support from IT, IBM support team, and that took the longer period of time. Now, how you want to start is basically start with a sandbox environment. Take your most important package, which has the maximum number of reports. Convert that package to DQM, test that report. Once you will test the report, you will find it out how many reports are working, how many are failing. And that will give you an estimate that how much you should plan, how much duration should you plan, and how much buffer you should keep.
Another thing to Sumit's point about kind of identifying the content that's most important and starting there. We've recently added an inventory feature which utilizes Cognos audit data to help give you a very clear picture of what content is actually being used. We often find that a lot of, and this is something we've been recommending for upgrades in particular. We often find that long-lived Cognos environments tend to carry forward a lot of cruft, a lot of copies of reports, copies of packages, and so the scope of your effort may not be, from the word go, the scope of the effort may not be as big as you think it is. So with inventory and then sort of its sister feature reduction, we can begin to reduce the scope even before you begin the actual effort of testing and verifying DQM support. I guess we got another question about the inventory feature. Is a MotioCI feature, inventory and reduction.
What was the approach taken by Sumit to convert reports from my folder to DQM?
I saw that question from Hema. This is, the my folder has been a tricky place for us as well. But when you are converting the report, when you are going from 32-bit, CQM to DQM package, you don't convert the report, you convert the package. Now, we had an agreement, we just used our communication just to let them know that if you are keeping your reports into my folder, you have to test those reports. Otherwise, we have provided one folder where user can put their report, their most important report, and we tested those reports and fixed it. You will be surprised that the number of reports that goes to my folder, in our case, only 20% was used. So that's a larger problem. Just to give you a heads up, what we are doing now, we change our corporate policy, and we said that we are not going to allow my folder now. We are going to give them individual folders where they can keep their reports. So it allows the upgrade and testing and everything goes efficiently. And that's what we are doing right now.
All right, thank you, Sumit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close out the webinar. If you have any questions, please continue to submit those through the Q&A. We will have someone follow back up with you, so not to worry. Again, thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day.